Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
Store. It's a 16,000 square foot competitor of Total Wine. The reason why I started it, when I was at home with no job, I'd go to Total Wines, buy some wine, come home, make my wife dinner, and she would drink the wine and get a raging headache, and I couldn't figure out why. And so I found the original wine buyer at Total Wine, and they told me about kind of the Total Wine's way they bottle their own juice and add sulfites. And so I said, you know what? Mount Pleasant doesn't have a beverage superstore. I was introduced to a wine salesman who wanted to kind of open one of those. He knew I wrote business plans, helped people start the companies. And so we worked together. Got my old restaurant operator, Scott Peace, come in, work with me on that. And then the three of us opened up bottles. It shot out like a cannon. It was very successful. We now have 4 locations. Scott and Mike run that business. They do an exceptional job. And then so progressing through, kept looking at the restaurant industry. I mean, I'd started some other companies in development, multifamily development, RV resorts, assisted living. Just all kinds of things, just keeping myself busy.
Sure.
And in 2017, I think it was January 2017, I was introduced to a guy through a mutual friend who wanted to open up a biscuit restaurant.
Yeah.
Sat down, met him. His name was Josh. And I said, look, you're in the medical testing world. You're hugely successful. Why do you want to get in the restaurant world? And he just said, I was in it early age. I worked for Host Marriott, traveled all over the United States, even in different countries, helped them open. And he went through an early midlife crisis when he was 23 and became a chef. I was like, what? Early midlife crisis? And I opened my own restaurant.
Yeah.
So we collaborated. Had a location we wanted to do in Mount Pleasant. Couldn't get a long-term lease. So we tabled the idea, and I did a lot of research. I mean, I've traveled around. I went to Maple Street Biscuit that had started in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
I was like, I like it. They're kind of more of a coffee. They're not really focused on food.
Yeah.
Went to Biscuit Love in Nashville, which was really cool, but really kind of geared to millennials, kind of a, really kind of an eclectic location they had in downtown Nashville. And so I was like, I love it. There's a business for this. I said, I really want to make brunch fun again. And I said, so let's make this thing crazy. And literally right after saying that, I read an article. We have a food critic here. She was here, and she wrote this article. She was at a catering event, and this guy, Michael Greeley, his wife, started this company called Vicious Biscuit. It was they were at their first catering event. And I called up Josh. I said, look, if you still want to do this, I know we can't get a long-term lease on this location in Mount Pleasant. I said, but this is the name we want. I can build a brand behind that. So I called up Michael Greeley and I said, look, if your food is half as good as your name is, we need. And I was like, what's your plans with this? He goes, well, we just started and I think we want to do a food truck. I go, well, food truck can be like food prison if you don't do it right. I said, I'm a bricks and mortar kind of guy. I said, I start and grow companies. I said, let's meet. And so literally the next morning at 8:30, I was in his kitchen at his house, had his 3 biscuits he had, and was blown away. And with Josh, I said, Josh, let's get that realtor back on the phone. That location we wanted 6-8 months ago, I don't think they're tearing it down. I don't think they're going to develop it. Let's get them on the phone. And in Michael's kitchen, we called the real estate agent. He goes, you won't believe this. We just had a meeting yesterday that we're done developing in Mount Pleasant right now. He goes, I'll give you the lease you want, George. And I've negotiated so many leases. And I was like, I want a 10-year lease with 3 5-year options. I want to build this thing out right. So we all partnered up. I told Michael and Josh, I said, I got to put you in a test kitchen for quite a bit until we figure this out. I wanted the throughput of 6 to 8 minute ticket times like we used to have in McAlister's. I said, I don't want to do full service again. Already been involved in that in multiple restaurants. I said, I want a quick casual. I want it to be fun. I want I want brunch to be fun again. Right.
Mhm.
And so Josh and I and Michael, we really worked hard on this menu, built it out. And then December 22nd, 2018, we opened it. And here we are today.
Yeah.
It took off and it was a great success. In October of 2019, Josh came to me and said, look, I wanted to be in this business, but my medical company is just pulling me this way. And, he had a wife and two very young children. I said, Josh, how about this? How about I'm going to go out and find an operator. We need to build a culture around here. We're successful in spite of ourselves. I mean, even though from day one, we wrote out the SOP of every single spot or job in the restaurant, just like we did with McAlister's back in the day when I was building out the UFOC back in the day,
Right.
now FDD.
Mhm.
And I said, look, I want to do a proof of concept. I want to build this thing out, build corporate locations, and, one day maybe think about franchising.
Mhm.
So sat down with Josh. I said, how about this? How about I buy you out? I'm gonna go get an operator. I said, this guy, he ran all my Myrtle Beach and Charleston locations, who you had on your show, Michael Ball,
Yeah.
who you met in Wilmington.
Yeah.
And so I went to Mike. He was working at Chick-fil-A at the time.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, let's meet for a beer. So we met for a beer and he goes, all right, 5 minutes into it, I'm like, how's your family? How's everything going? He goes, look, what's up your sleeve? He goes, you're always on something. What's going on? I said, look, Mike, I'm involved in this concept. I'm about 10,000 foot, even though I'm there almost every day. My daughter's working in there, 15, practically running the place. I said, this is the simplest operation. The food's exceptional. Look at our reviews. I said, don't take my opinion about it. I said, go check it out and then let me know. So he goes and, a month later, he calls me up and says, let's meet again. I said, all right. So we met, in North Charleston. He lived in Somerville, which is outside of Charleston. We met there again, had a beer, and he goes, I haven't seen people excited about a concept like this since we first brought McAlister's to South Carolina. I said, I know. I said, I mean, look at our reviews. I said, I'm getting so many requests to take this national. And I said, people are already asking me about franchising and all that. And he said, what's your plan? I said, Mike, I'm not making the same mistakes we made in McAlister's. I said, we started franchising when we had 4 units. We had one city location, the other college locations. We did not have the staff to really go out and support franchising. Love Dr. Newcomb to death. My daughter actually just ran into him in Oxford at the game this past weekend.
Yeah.
To him. And, Dr. Newcomb at that time didn't know he was selling franchises to anybody. And that's where my job was for the first year and a half out of college. I was cleaning up that mess. So I said, before we start franchising, I actually called up Patrick Walls, our old franchise attorney. He was out in Vegas with another restaurant concept, Caparotti's at the time. And I said, Pat, what do you think I should do? He goes, I said, do I build corporate locations or do I do franchising? And he goes, without a doubt, you do franchising because it helps build the brand. And he says, but you're on the right track. Build your locations, go out and test markets. He says, build as many as you can. And I was like, I want to build at least 6 or 7 of these before we even start franchising, because I want to have the support staff. I did not want to go through the nightmare we did when we first started McAlister's, where we were just pulled everywhere. I mean, there was not enough time in the day to cover everything that we wanted to do with all the franchisees. So I said, all right. I said, who should I get to, help me do this? He goes, call up Mark Siebert, the guy you worked with FranCorp that I came from. He says, he owns iFranchise. Have him come down and check it out. I said, all right. So I called up Mark. I said, Mark, I don't know if you remember who I am, but I was a franchisee of McAlister. He goes, oh, I remember you. He goes, you sold more franchises as a franchisee than you did when you were with a franchisor. And I was like, well, that's true. And he said, he says, I love your concept. I've been checking you out. He says, look, I know you want to build out those corporate locations, keep doing that, but we'll help you write the FTD, and I said, great. So we kind of dragged it out because I wanted our corporate locations open. Well, we had opened our second location in Somerville in July of 2020, right in the middle of, and I was like, well, we're trying to open up other locations. Very difficult finding real estate, but I was like, I want to spread us out and test all these different markets. So that's how we ended up in Charlotte in a very, not a downtown market, but pretty close to it. Ended up in Boone, in a small college town. Went to Wilmington, which is tourist, and then went to Jacksonville Beach, because 1, my mother lived there, and 2, I wanted to test a true tourist market. And we learned a heck of a lot from that. We were able to really, figure out who we were. And we opened these 4 locations in 18 months. So I really stressed our system. I wanted to make sure that we opened each corporate location as if it was its own franchise.
Yeah.
And that really helped us build out the SOP. And then once we did that, we were able to finish the franchise document, the FTD, with iFranchise. And, when they came down, they were like, this is going to be pretty easy one, man. He goes, we're so used to building out training modules and all this stuff for you. He goes, you already got it.
Yeah.
I said, well, no, I just
You
need
built
the
the foundation. Yeah.
And so we got together, we rolled it out, we opened our 6th location, and then we launched franchising. Flipped the switch in November of 2022, and lo and behold, I had 136 applications right out of the gate. And I was just like, oh boy, what do I do now?
Yeah.
So scrambled around, found some guys to help me kind of manage the franchise process of it. Out of those 136 franchise requests, we only chose 5.
Yeah.
Could have sold as many as I wanted.
Yeah.
I was like, no, I want to find 5 great first franchisees.
That's smart.
Learn to walk before you run. Yeah.
That's smart. Yeah. Well,
so
you've been in the franchise world long enough, in the restaurant world long enough to know what you're looking for in terms of an operator, right? In terms of of an owner and that kind of thing. And, Michael, when Michael was on with us, he was also talking about the fact that, it's incredibly important that these franchisees understand that there are certain monikers, there are certain levels, certain things you have to hit. And if you're not hitting them, something's wrong. You have to figure out, because you guys literally have a system down to where if somebody's thinking about buying a franchise from you, you've not only trained them, but once they open the restaurant, you absolutely know if they're spending any more than a certain amount of time there, they're doing something wrong. Something's up,
Correct.
so, right? And so you guys have the sort of the checkpoints in place and the checks and balances, if you will, so that people, and I think that's part of what's so brilliant about what you're doing. I love the food. Don't get me wrong. I'm a Vicious Biscuit addict. Okay. But on top of that, I think it's incredibly important as a former franchise owner. I owned a Keller Williams office for 18 years. You have to know what the model is, and then you have to know whether you're implementing the model or not. My dad, back when I was much younger than I am now, I was 13. I'm 58 now. My dad went to work for a company called Mako Auto Painting and Body Works. And I had an opportunity to meet Tony Martino, who was the founder and the CEO of the company. And Tony loved me. He told my dad, he said, when this kid, I think I was 13 at the time or 14. He said, when this kid gets to be 18, he's mine. Right. He's a good guy, but he would take me backstage at the conferences, at the conventions, and he'd open up the curtains and he'd say, okay, look out here. When we get into this award ceremony, we get into talking about the corporation and all that kind of stuff. He said, watch the people that get it, watch the people that don't, because you'll be able to see who gets it, who doesn't, right? And so afterwards, after we were done, he said, which table got it, which table didn't? He literally quizzed me. That's awesome. I told him, I said, these tables got it and everybody else doesn't. And he said, yeah, that's our problem. He said, we should hire you today to run our franchising for us, because there was literally maybe 10% that got it. Everybody else was doing their own thing. They were running their own thing. You're right. There's a model in franchising, and what you have to do is follow the model. What you did that's so brilliant, and part of the reason why I wanted you on this podcast, I need people to hear your story, because Michael shared with me his experience with you, okay? What you've done that I believe is incredibly brilliant, besides the fact that you keep learning from the mistakes that you've made, you went out of the gun big time with McAlister's, right? And it was all about growth, and it was all about, let's get this done fast. And right. The thing is with Vicious Biscuit, you've gone through so many of these trials and tribulations that now you've built a rock solid foundation. So if somebody's considering finance or franchising with you, buying a franchise, they now know that I know with confidence that they have a system they can plug into. And there literally are boundaries, there are checks and balances, there are all the things that, and different KPIs, right, that they need to be able to hit. And if they're not hitting them, something's wrong. We need to address it and figure it out. And I believe you all are equipped in a unique way to help franchisees figure that out.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, and I appreciate it because it truly is. I didn't, I'm 51,
Yeah.
and I was like, I am not going to go through that again, what
Yeah.
we went through. I mean, we darn near almost broke McAlister's.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was, and I saw Neil Newcomb at a conference not too long ago, and we were talking, and he says, we got we shot it out of a cannon.
Mhm.
We didn't know what we were doing, and it stalled and we couldn't sell franchises. And he
Yeah.
said, what you've done is you've gone out and taken the risk.
Yeah.
And listen, there's so many great podcasts like yours and others have talked about franchising, right?
Mhm.
And anytime you look at a franchise, if a franchisor only has 2 locations,
Yeah.
be weary.
Yeah.
We went out and opened 6 locations. Some of them were great, some of them aren't.
Yeah.
But now we've learned from that, right?
Yeah.
And the best thing that I did was in 2021, I wanted to bring in a CFO, part-time controller, and was working with a company for one of my real estate companies. I said, listen, do you have anybody else that you haven't? She's like, sure enough, we just had this person, they were a part-time CFO company, just started with us.
Mhm.
And I said, well, what's her background? And she was like, well, she ran a big tech company up in New York, family business and all that stuff. I said, I want to meet her. Met her. I said, okay, I need her to come in part-time and figure out my back office.
Right.
And I said, this is what I got to have in place. I need to know absolutely everything. Because see, when in February of 2020,
Mhm.
I tested these different register systems because I said, if we're going to grow this, I'm not going to do what we did in McAlister's and change register systems when we're 30 something franchisees in. It was a nightmare, right?
Right.
So I tested all these different register systems and I found the one I really liked, but I
Mhm.
only know what I know.
Right.
And I was like, all right, I need somebody who's really intelligent, knows tech, and be able to do this. Well,
Yeah.
at that same time, I was like, I'm not going to build this thing off of QuickBooks. I said,
Mhm.
we use Mass 90, which was crazy. It was very in depth and all that. And I said, Mass 90 is in the past. I said, what's the best program? And we found Restaurant 365,
Mhm.
but it's a very complex system.
Yeah.
You can get a little bit out of it, or you can get a whole heck of a lot out of it. And I
Mhm.
wanted everything out of it, right? And my one of my closest friends, who's also my CPA, he's been my CPA for a long time, said to me, when I was like, all right, we're using QuickBooks right this moment,
Mhm.
but I want to know absolutely everything in my food cost.
Yeah.
And I said, I want to know everything. And I'll never forget, he goes, George, it's like you're picking fly poop out of pepper. He's
Mhm.
like, you want to know every single number. I was like, yes. I said, when we used to train in McAlister's, when I was with franchisees, I would take the employee we just hired yesterday,
Mhm.
and I'd walk around and I said, do you know how much this loaf of bread costs? Do you know how much this slice of bread costs? Do you know? And I made sure that my general managers knew and trained their employees absolutely everything. And I have a saying in every GM meeting. I'm like, if you're not hiring people better and smarter than you to fill your shoes, then you're not going to advance.
Yeah.
And if you're scared of your job, that means you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
And I said, so I was like, the success I've had in all the businesses I've started, I've always hired people smarter, better than me, right? Because I only know what I know.
Yeah.
And so when I met Amanda, she was part of the stuff. And I said, listen, you got a tech background. I want you to spend 6 months and really dig in where we are. Well, we started with Restaurant 365. Well, COVID hits, right?
Yeah.
California shuts down. We can't get anybody on the phone. So we spent 2 years building that system out, getting very little help.
Mhm.
And, it was COVID. I get it. People had the different views of when you can work and not work. And I was finally got Restaurant 365 on the phone one day. I'll never forget it. And I said, guys, listen, you give us a 30-minute window. We have 260 something action items we need to cover.
Mhm.
And it was this really nice lady that was on the phone she was out of Atlanta. She just moved over there. And I said, ma'am, have you ever been to Charleston? She goes, yeah, I've been to Charleston. She goes, I love Charleston. I said, will you please move to Charleston? I said, I'll pay for your entire family to move here if you come fix this darn system. I said, I need to know this before I ever start franchising because I knew we needed to build the tech stack to be able to support our franchisees. See, like when we run a Vicious Biscuit today, and I think Mike may have said this on the podcast, is if our managers work over 45 hours, there's a problem.
That's it.
Like,
That's it.
why I say we have every system in place that you should be working 40 hours a week, no
Yeah.
more. And if
Yeah.
you're working 45, that means you're extremely busy. But if
Yeah.
you're working over 45, you're not doing your job.
Yeah.
And
There's a disconnect somewhere and it needs to get fixed. Yeah.
And we have every system in place that our managers spend less than 45 minutes a week on administrative work.
Yeah.
We have everything so buttoned up in our tech stack. We know everything in that restaurant, every cost, where everything's going. And we want our managers to focus on the customer. See, we're in the entertainment business, not the restaurant business.
Yep.
We want our managers to be out there training every moment and entertaining every moment. But most important, entertaining their employees. So we had a saying a long time ago when I started Mac Corp. It was our franchise name, or franchise of McAlister Deli. We called it Mac Corp. And we used to say, employees first, customer second. If you're not taking care of your employees, how can they take care of your customers?
Right.
And we do that through empowerment and training and teaching them everything about the business. Because the most rewarding thing about being in this restaurant business to me, because people ask me all the time. I mean, I'll never forget when Amanda and Mike were sitting when Amanda first started working for us, she goes, "Why are you doing this? You don't need to do it." I said, "I love it because it creates opportunity for people to have the same opportunity I had when I was 23, to be able to go out and own your own business." And, you hear it all the time when other people talk about, why do you franchise? Well, you do one franchise, it's a job. You do multiple franchises, you create generational wealth.
Yeah.
And that's what I want our employees. I tell our employees, you give me 2 great years, you learn how to empower people, work through people, not around them, and you come to me and you're ready to be a franchisee, I'll back you. I'll let you, I'll give you the same opportunity that Dr. Newcomb gave me to become a franchisee.
Yeah.
And so that's why I love the business. I could go on for hours about why I truly love the business, but it's just, we're in the people business and it's a lot of fun. And so,
well, it's what attracted your daughter to coming to work with you. It's why she went to Ole Miss. It's why she's studying. It's why she's getting ready to graduate, the whole thing, and when you can inspire your children to do what you do for a living, you're onto something. You're doing something the right way. Right. And for her to say to you, "Dad, I want to create opportunity just like you've created opportunity." That's a big deal. That's a big deal. We call it paying it forward, but that's a big, big deal. And, I don't know if you know this, and you may not, but I'm going to share it with you. Your managers, and especially your manager at Wilmington, told me the story of the tech person you went out to get. Right. And how you dialed in the systems and how you got this thing down. And he told me, he said, "Mr. Litton, we're in the entertainment business."
That's right.
Literally. Okay. This all came from you, and this all came from Michael Ball. It's, you guys are doing this the right way, and your messaging is correct. One of the things that they told me, and I do a lot of listening. I listen to a lot, and I'm always trying to figure out what's really happening versus what people are telling me, And one of the things that they told me was, they said, when the executives with this company come here, they don't come here and talk at us. They come here, they roll up their sleeves, and they get on the line, and they help us. Seriously, George, this is a big deal. When they were telling me about how you manage and how Michael manages, they were lighting up. You don't get to see that as much as we do when we're right, because you weren't around. You weren't there. I was out on the patio, right? And it's raining cats and dogs, right? And all he had done, bless his heart, all he had done was come out and ask me, "How was your food? How was your meal?" Right? "How was your experience here? How was the staff?" Right? And I'm literally saying to him, like, "Oh, I think I'm happy. I've been here 3 days in a row, right? I'm pretty sure I'm addicted, right?"
Right.
And I said, and I would absolutely, I said, "I have this podcast and I would love to have the people that run this place on my podcast because they are onto something." Right. And he goes, "Well, let me tell you about the people that run this place." I'm not joking. He went into this whole thing about, and it was like, and he goes, I'm going to connect you with our marketing person. We're going to make sure that we get Michael." He said, "Michael Ball's the guy to talk to." Right. Then I talked to Michael, and it's a George McLaughlin love fest. Okay. I mean, this guy is your biggest fan. I mean, your daughter obviously is too, but I mean, he's a big fan of yours, right? And so I literally left the interview with Michael thinking, okay, I got to reach out to George. I got to get George on the podcast, right? The thing about this that's so really, really cool And you're absolutely, and these people that are talking to you, they're telling you, why are you doing this? You don't need to do this. You're doing this out of the joy of doing it. And you
Without
can
doubt.
find that from your employees. Your employees talk about the joy that you and Michael bring to the company and the joy that you literally pass to them. And it's contagious, man. It's a big, big deal. And if somebody's thinking about buying a franchise, obviously you're very, very selective and you should be. Okay.
Right.
But if somebody's thinking about buying a franchise, I feel like they're in great company if they can figure out a way to get you to approve them, simply because you figured it out. And the spirit and where your heart is, not just yours, but the entire company. I mean, starts with you, but that's what's bringing your daughter into this. And when you can win your kids over, it's all over but the struggle, right? I had this franchise, this real estate franchise, for all those years, and I ran it out of my house. So when the not so pleasant things happened, they landed on my desk, right? So I was the broker and the owner, and I was the guy that ended up in court. I was the guy that ended up, when the agents wouldn't talk to each other because they're 40-year-old infants. I was the guy that was on the phone with the broker going, "Hey, we're going to have to figure this out," right?
Right.
I would pick up the phone and call brokers from other major franchises, competitors of ours, and they would say to me, "Mike, now that we know you're involved, we feel better because we figure out a way to make it work because our heart's in the right place," right?
That's
My
right.
kids growing up, George, told me they would never be involved in my business. Do you know that my daughter has already worked for me
That's
and my
awesome.
son is getting ready to come down here and come to work with me?
That's
I
great.
asked him 4 years ago at college. We went up there to see him because my mom said that he sounded like he was homesick. So we went up there to bring home to him, right? So we go up there and the girls wanted to sleep in. I said, "Hey, why don't I take you to breakfast Thursday morning?" And he goes, I said, "I'll take you to your favorite place." And he goes, "Sure." So I take him. I said, "Let me ask you a question. If money was no object and there were no restrictions in this world at all, perfect world, what would you do for a living?" Now, this is a kid who is in a 4.5-year program at University of Nebraska at Lincoln to earn his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and a minor in biomedical engineering.
Good
He
grief.
wants a minor in biomedical engineering because he wants what he does for a living to help people. I mean, how sweet is that?
That's
Okay.
awesome.
So I'm sitting there with this son of mine, my firstborn, and I said, "What would you do if there were no restrictions and money was no object?" He said, "Dad, I would invest in real estate with you.
That's awesome.
You could have knocked me over
That's,
with
I
a
mean,
feather."
you can't have better
Right?
confirmation.
And I
Right.
said, "Can I ask you why?" And he said, "Dad, you don't understand how magnetic you are when you talk about investing in real estate and legacy wealth and the things that you talk about." He said, "I don't know anybody on this planet with a heartbeat that wouldn't want to work with you."
That's great.
Isn't that
That's
amazing?
I mean, that's what we do. What we do. I mean, because that is,
Exactly. Exactly.
there's money's one thing, but
Yeah.
it's nothing when you can see people grow. I mean, we had this thing, and Mike Ball was one of the guys that helped start it. We used to have this. We still have the shirts made. It says "Mac for Life."
Yeah.
And to this day, I still see it on Facebook. When we
Yeah.
opened our 7th location in Columbia, South Carolina, we had those kids
Yeah.
who are now adults owning their own business,
Yeah.
married with children, who come in and said, "You changed my life."
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's no amount of money you can make in the world
Yeah.
that could outweigh that. And
That's
that
true.
is, to me, is the whole reason why I love this business. Because, I was fortunate enough, I used to get asked a lot by the South Carolina Hospitality Association, but also the Chamber of Commerce, to speak at graduating seniors, graduating from college and in high school.
Yeah.
I'd go in there and I'd say, "Okay, first question I got to ask, who here has worked in a restaurant?" And less than half of them would raise their hand. I go, "All right, whoever didn't raise their hand, I want you to quit whatever you're doing tomorrow and go work in a restaurant, because you need to learn how to work in public."
Sure.
That could not be more true today,
Yeah.
because of the darn cell phone,
Yep.
that these kids don't know how to communicate. And
Yeah.
so when my son, he's, granted they had COVID and all that stuff, and that was the only way they could communicate. But more, as soon as he was 15 years old, actually he was 14, but when he was 15, I was like, you're going to go work at Vicious. You need to learn how to deal with the public.
Yeah.
And I said, if everybody in the United States went and worked at a restaurant and learned how to deal with the public, the world would be a better place.
Yep.
And I say that to anybody and everybody. If somebody comes to me and like, hey, my son's about to graduate. He doesn't know what he wants to do. I said, go work in a restaurant. And they're like, wait, restaurant? That's, the bottom tier of the working class. I'm like, no, it's not. And I was like, you got to learn how to deal with the public.
Yeah.
And I tell you, it's a great business, but having your kids say that to you, I mean,
yeah,
I don't care how big of real estate deals you've done.
Yeah.
There's nothing more rewarding than hearing that. I mean, there's not. So
no way. And it's indicative of why your daughter's coming to work with you, right? And why she's going to Ole Miss and all that. Because it's a big deal. And they're watching, dude. They're watching, they're listening, they're constantly witnessing everything that we do and every way that we do it. And it's a real testament to you that your children are coming in and doing what you're doing, and they want to do it because of the opportunity that you're providing. So I cannot thank you enough for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been a fast hour, and I thoroughly enjoyed every second of it. I'm so glad that I had a chance to get to know you, and I hope one of these days I can come to North Carolina and we can get together and go have a Vicious Benny.
Dude, you let me know anytime. It'd be my treat. I would love to do it.
Appreciate you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.